How's it going, everybody? I hope you're all having a wonderful day. In this week's video, I'm going to show you how I make these chopsticks using just a drill and a belt sander. Let's get started. So for today's project, we're using this piece of wengi. It is roughly just a little over 2 inches wide, 4/4 thick, maybe just a little heavier in the 4/4, and roughly 4 feet wide or 4 feet long. When it comes to making chopsticks, the species of the wood makes a big difference. One of the things that you want to be mindful of is the color of the wood that you're using. So using a darker colored wood would show less of the staining from the food than a lighter species of wood like maple. So try to avoid lighter colored wood. The other thing that you want to be mindful of is the density of the wood and pore structures. Ideally, you would want to use wood that has less pores so that they don't soak up some of the juices from the food as much. And you also want a denser wood because honestly it has a better feel when you're using it. So those are the two primary choices when it comes to species selection. Once you've made your species selection, you want to be mindful of the grain patterns on the board that you're looking at. In this case, we have this grain that's coming up at an arc and exiting at an arc. So this area is probably not an ideal area to be making chopsticks out of because you want as much long linear strands of wood as possible. The reason for it is in the tip of a chopstick, it's actually very, very fine and very thin. And so the more linear those grain patterns are, the stronger the tip is going to be. And in fact, you can kind of see I broke this tip, even so, while being mindful of the selection of the wood grain. So you definitely want to use wood grains like this section, for example, where it's a lot more linear, although we're kind of at an angle. That's okay to some extent. It's not going to hurt a whole lot, but in the most perfect scenario, you'd want the grains to run very, very parallel to the board so that these grains are going nice and straight on your chopstick. So of course, this is not a chopstick. This piece is gonna have to be cut, and the thickness is going to have to be refined to make it such that it can become a chopstick. But the first thing that we want to do is to cut this to a more manageable length. And if you ever wondered what lengths are chopsticks typically, according to Dr. Google, it's anywhere from 9 to 10 inches. And in our case, we're gonna make it a little bit oversized, and I'll explain why we do it oversized because there's going to be a little cutoff in our chopstick making process. So I'm going to cut these at 12 inches, and then I'll show you how we mill the rest of it. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, let's say you have access to a drill, you have access to a belt sander, but you don't have access to all of these woodworking tools that would allow you to process a rough piece of lumber like this into something that's more suitable for these chopsticks. The way to overcome that problem is to purchase these 3/8 by 3/8, they're kind of like dowels, but they're in square pegs. And you can get them from Rockler or Woodcraft, and probably in like 36-inch or 24-inch lengths. In fact, the cool thing is they usually carry the more exotic species for those types of wood, and you can find them in like Purple Heart, wengi like this one, or something more exotic that is actually perfectly suitable for this project. So for those of you who are on the fence, I really think you should give it a go, as long as you have those two main tools that we need for this project, because it's quick, easy, and fun, and at the end of it, you get to use it to eat food, so that's pretty awesome. Anyway, so that's my little spiel. Let's get to milling our piece of wengi, and I'll show you how the rest of the project goes. Now that we've completed our resawing process and we've got our 3/8 of an inch wide material, we're gonna actually keep the fence in the same spot and then reorient the boards and then make another pass through so that we get to basically create 3/8 inch by 3/8 inch by, you know, whatever the length of this particular piece is, which happens to be about 12 inches. So we're gonna be able to create all of our rough chopstick pieces all on the bandsaw. You can also do this on the table saw too, by the way. Again, I'm doing this on the bandsaw because I think it's a little safer. So once we've cut all of the pieces, we now have basically a bunch of sticks. Sticks that are 3/8 of an inch wide by 3/8 of an inch deep, and then about 12 inches in length. And this is actually what you want. Even though they're rough, you know, cut and they're not perfectly straight, or they're pretty close, but they're not perfectly straight, that's okay, because what we're gonna do next is going to clean all of this up. So I think you're getting a sense of where this is going. We've got a drill, we've got our sticks that we've made. I'm going to chuck this one up here onto the drill. And you want to make sure that, you know, when you do chuck it, that it chucks kind of straight. And tighten it up a little bit. See? This is kind of spinning nice and centered. Doesn't have to be perfect, but this is what you're looking for. You don't want it to go all out of whack like this, okay? So this is where rubber meets the road. What I have here is the belt sander with an 80 grit paper mounted. Of course, you know, we've got the drill with the stick chucked up. What we're gonna do in a moment is we're gonna turn on the belt sander, and then we're also going to turn on the drill. And as both this is moving and this is spinning, we're going to slowly introduce our stick into the sandpaper. And the angle kind of depends on how you want the shape of your chopstick to be. But you know, you want to be mindful of the angle that you're creating here, because you want to be consistent, you know, roughly with that angle with all of the chopsticks that you're making. So let me go ahead, get everything turned on, and I'll show you what this looks like as it's being made. So this is what it looks like, you know, off the drill, right? What we're gonna do is we're gonna rotate it, and we're going to press down on the belt sander on each of the faces to make sure that we clean up the roughness of the edges that came off the bandsaw. And then we're also going to just kind of ever so slightly round over the corners so that we soften the edges there as well. Here we go. Now that we have all of the faces sanded and we've also rounded the corners a little bit, it looks a lot more like, you know, a real chopstick. So what we're gonna do next is we're going to refine the sanding by using a hand sander and a finer grit of paper. Finer grit, and then continue to sand a little bit further. All right, so we just went through 2 grits of paper, and then I'm going to add a higher grit of paper. This is 400, by the way, and just kind of hand sand the rest of it. Okay, and then we can kind of get the length that we want, and in my case, I want these to be 9 inches. And then you can use a scrap piece of wood like this to kind of help you position and make sure that all of the tips are touching. So with the excess piece cut off, we now have chopsticks that are ready for finishing. It's really not necessary to apply finish to chopsticks like this. You can leave it natural and that's completely fine. But if you were to finish it, I would recommend that you use something that's natural, like mineral oil or butcher block paste. And what I have here is essentially a homemade version of butcher block paste that consists of mineral oil and beeswax. So let's apply that. It's probably a little too much here. Yep, definitely too much. Alright, so I think I put a little bit too much. So I'm going to use another clean paper towel to remove the excess material. There you go. Well, that's all for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please click the like button below and consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.